Tycoons of Small Biz, a podcast where small business owners are celebrated as the backbone of the American economy. Each week, we introduce you to tycoons who share their stories and advice so that small business owners may learn from their experiences. Tycoons is powered by Backbone Planning Partners. Join us now as our hosts connect you to today's Tycoons.
Good afternoon, Tycoons, and welcome to today's episode of Tycoons of Small Biz. I'm your host here, as always, Austin Peterson, coming to you live from the very, very hot Phoenix, Arizona area today. And we're excited, obviously, as we do this every other week now, to bring in a new guest and talk to them about what they do in the business community, what's impacted them, what's going on in their world, et cetera, and in hopes of that helping all of the small business owner community throughout the country that are truly the backbone of the American economy. So with that being said, we definitely have a tycoon of small biz on the podcast with us today. We've got Chad Kalland coming to us from Houston, Texas. Chad is the Chief Executive Officer or CEO of Vecta Environmental Services, LLC. They're based outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana and Gonzales, Louisiana, but Chad is based in Houston. So Chad, welcome in.
Thank you, Austin. I appreciate it. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. And we talked a little bit before, just, for those listening, I think Houston is probably one of the very few places in this country that have summers worse than we do in Phoenix.
Yeah, it's been pretty brutal this year. Last week we got about a quarter inch of rain or something, and it was first rain we've had all summer. So doing a rain dance ever since, but it's not working.
Yeah, it's been a brutal summer here in Phoenix too. I mean, I think today it's going to get up to 115, 114, it looks like. Yeah, we've had so many days over 110 this year. It's been a brutal summer.
Yeah, I think it's that way everywhere.
All right, Chad. Well, let's before we jump into kind of the business side and what you guys are doing at Vecta Environmental, why don't you give us just a little bit of background on you? Where'd you grow up? What was life like growing up? Are you married? Do you have any kids?
Yep. Sort of. Good deal. Yeah, I was born in Minnesota, but never really lived there. Kind of son of a Navy guy, so got moved to Norfolk, Virginia, and grew up there until my early teens. Had a great time in Norfolk, man, rat in the streets, and moved to Mississippi when I was a sophomore in high school. Dad got transferred down to Stennis Space Center in Mississippi, so moved down there. Finished college at the University of Southern Mississippi, and then moved to New Orleans right after graduation. Kind of spent about 20 years in New Orleans, and New Orleans was home. Loved the city, still have a lot of friends and family there. But in 2010, took a job in Houston, Texas, and didn't really know a whole lot about Houston except where some of the jobs I had done here. And my vision of Houston was a ship channel, right? And that's really all I knew because I was in the environmental business, and that's where I spent most of my time. But found a great community just a little north of Houston called Kingwood. My wife and I moved over, and then shortly thereafter had our daughter. She's going to turn 12 here in a couple of days, and I've really loved it. Houston's become home, a much better move than I ever expected. And, great people, great town, a lot to do, great business environment. A lot of people from a lot of different parts of the world move here. So it's a good, diverse community. And have really enjoyed it, and we've all kind of settled in and made ourselves part of the community.
Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, you've lived kind of all over the country.
Yeah.
And, you talk about environmental. So let me just kind of lay the groundwork for those listening, because that can mean a lot of different things, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to read the company description you guys gave us, environmental. So Vecta Environmental is a provider of high-quality industrial cleaning solutions, strategically located in the Gulf Coast region and southeastern United States. They distinguish themselves by delivering the highest level of employee safety and customer service in our industry, specializing in hydroblasting, chemical cleaning, hydro excavation, and turnaround services. Vecta Environmental provides preventative maintenance for the global supply chain.
Yep.
So lots there. So kind of just give us the background. What exactly does Vecta do, and how did you get involved with Vecta? Because for our listeners, you're actually one of the few guests that we've had on that isn't a founder of the company, if I remember correctly from our pre-qual.
Yep.
You're the CEO, so
yep.
Fill us in.
So my background is more on the environmental side. My early background was cleaning up oil spills. My first job in the industry was as a field chemist cleaning up Superfund sites. So I would go out and kind of figure out what was on site and how to get it cleaned up and then how to safely get rid of it. Right. Kenny Rouse, who's the founder of Vecta, he and I worked together at a previous company. Kenny's based in Baton Rouge. His background is industrial cleaning. He likes to say, when his friends went off to college, he went to the shipyard and went to work. His dad ran a shipyard, his grandfather ran a shipyard, and that's kind of where Kenny came up. So he's been doing industrial cleaning, tank cleaning his entire career. I left the company that we were working together at in 2009, and Kenny was approached by a customer of ours at the time, by a customer of that company, and really encouraged him to do his own thing, right? Really liked the work Kenny was doing, had some issues with the company, but valued Kenny's dedication, his hard work, and his safety, and kind of encouraged Kenny to go out and do his own thing. So Kenny kind of took a leap of faith, started the business really just by himself, working kind of nights and weekends when he could to help this customer out, and just kind of took off from there. He and I stayed in touch. I was in Houston at the time, and he invited me to join him in 2011 to start Vecta. I just moved to Houston. Like I said, my wife was pregnant at the time. I had insurance and a nice, comfortable job, and the timing wasn't great. But we stayed in touch, and he stayed in Louisiana growing it. Just one customer at a time, adding one employee at a time. And then in 2013, I had kind of built a network here. We had some customers in Louisiana who had sites in Houston, so they wanted us to help support. So in 2013, I joined Kenny as the CEO. And then we've kind of grown it from there. Selena Ray, who's our CFO, she joined around the same time. She had been working with Kenny. She helped set up the LLC from the very beginning, but she came on full time around the same time I did. And then from there, we just started growing it kind of as the leadership team together.
Okay. So you've been there 10 years now, which
Yep.
is a long tenure for a CEO, quite honestly,
Yep.
anyhow. So give us the background on where you guys were in 2013 in terms of head count, revenue, whatever makes sense
Yep.
to you guys, and then where you are today.
So when I came on as CEO, it was in title only, man. We had about 8 employees. We were doing about 1.2 million in revenue in 2013. 2014, we took a really big leap. We brought on a large group of people, and we tripled the size of the business kind of overnight, and we jumped. We went from 1.2 to 4 to 12, and then kind of on from there. And then last year we were right at 100 million for the first time. So a little over 500 employees, kind of from Jacksonville, Florida now to Hobbs, New Mexico. So it's been a fun journey.
Yeah. So you guys at this point are literally on that cusp of being considered a medium-sized business in the country, right?
Yep.
It depends on which definition you look at it. Sometimes it's 100 million, sometimes it's 500, but you guys are literally right on the cusp of both of those. So, let's back up and just talk through over the last 10 years. Like, what are some of the things that you guys specifically did that have given you guys the ability to have this kind of success in 10 years time? Now, knowing he started before there, but really the big growth is in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think a big part of our success has been the fact that we are kind of decentralized. Our leadership, Kenny's in Louisiana, Kenny and Selena are in Louisiana, and I'm here. So it allowed us to kind of grow the company geographically, but with senior management on site the whole time, right? We didn't have to hire someone, hours away and hope that they were doing a good job. We were able to stay involved in the day-to-day operations at both locations kind of at the same time. So, the 2013 and 14 days, it was helpful, right? We tried a remote location, right? We had one in Memphis, and then we just didn't have enough oversight at the time, and it didn't really work out. So what was helpful for us, what worked for us anyway, was that we were decentralized. And then, what's really helped us more than anything is that because we came up in the industry, we both spent our entire careers in this industry. We have networks of people that we know and trust and who know and trust us. So when it came time to hire, we weren't really rolling the dice on a lot of people. We were bringing in people we knew and trusted. We knew how they worked. We knew they could do the work safely and effectively. So that was a huge help because we didn't have a whole lot of turnover in the early days because we knew who we were hiring.
Okay. Yeah, it's fair. So how do you guys go about, I mean, obviously, you talked about Kenny being approached by this customer of your previous employer, basically saying, I like what you do, but I'm not 100% on board with how the company operates. And so, convinced him to kind of go out on his own and get started. But that's only one customer, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't lead you to building a large organization. So how do you take what knowledge you had and what contacts you had and get them to trust that, okay, Kenny does good work, but Kenny's not going to do all of the work.
Right.
So
yeah.
how do you get them to trust you to kind of build to where you guys are today?
So, we like to say that outside of that one customer who's still, one of our larger customers, we started as everyone else's second or third call, right? We're a service industry company, a service industry provider, and they already have people providing this service inside the facility, right? So we would go in and sell that. We don't want all of your work. We want a shot at your work, right? But when the company you have now, either they're stretched too thin and they can't cover a job for you, you get something after hours, they can't support it, or they stub their toe, just give us a call. We want to come in and show you what we can do. And that's how we did it. We picked up, I mean, it was literally one customer at a time, one phone call at a time. And then, when the phone rang, because we had, we knew who we had hired, we had quality people. When we did go out there, when they did let us in the gate, we rarely left. Once we got our foot in the door, we started as their second or third call, but eventually we became their first.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. Just give us a shot when something goes wrong. Your main provider's too busy or whatever it is. Just, let us be that backup for you. And then if you provide quality work and they see that, it can turn into a lot.
One of our largest companies, so we do turnarounds, provide turnaround services as well. And, for people who aren't in our industry, what that means is, these large refineries have to perform maintenance on their equipment, right? The heat exchangers get fouled up, they lose efficiency, the vessels get clogged, they need to be, and then rather than shut the whole plant down, they shut down units at a time, and they'll bring in a bunch of people that'll work around the clock on this unit for about a month or so at a time. The first opportunity we got for one of the large oil refineries, they asked how many people we could provide, and we were honest. We just said, look, we can only provide 2 crews around the clock of people who know what they're doing, right? We could have scrapped something together and sent more people out there, but we didn't want to oversell. We wanted to be honest about what we could provide. And we went out there with those 2 crews and we did a good job. And then the next year they let us have 4. And now, that was 2014 was our first one. This year we're working at 3 of their refineries across the country, and we're the primary contractor on it. And it's just been by not overselling, not biting off more than you can chew, and then going out there and doing a good job for them.
Yeah. I mean, what you guys do for those who are who are listening that aren't from the Gulf Coast area of the United States, this is a big business in your guys' area of the country.
Yep.
Right. So give us an idea of the types of customers that you guys have. You don't have to share names necessarily. I'm comfortable doing that, but like, what do the companies look like that you guys are offering your services to?
So, a lot of the large oil refineries, the big 5 and those guys, a lot of chemical manufacturers. We work for companies that produce rubber and plastics. We work for a lot of commercial utility companies. Our hydro excavation services, we work with all the utility providers around, whether it's, digging holes for them to put utility poles or doing locating lines under soil rather than using kind of yellow equipment. We'll go out there and use water and a vacuum to do it safely. We work for a lot of I think I said chemical manufacturers, commercial construction as well. So, petrochemical manufacturing, chemical manufacturers, oil refineries, commercial utilities, those type of companies. Our customers are a lot bigger companies than we are, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was getting at is, you guys have successfully been able to sell over the last 10 years into very large organizations.
Yep.
And it was by that approach of let us be your third option, right? Let us, do whatever we can to kind of help you guys out when you're in a bind. And then you've successfully translated that into being one of their main providers, if not their main provider.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we don't make anything, right? We're not making a new valve that they can use, or we're not, doing some, we're not creating something that makes their process more efficient. We're just providing the service that does it. So, and we're not the low bid either. We're rarely the cheapest guy on the street. We're not the most expensive, but we provide a quality service that our customers like. And we tell them if the low bid is the determining factor, we're probably not your best option. If your low bid provider stubs their toe, we'll come in and do it. We can't match their price, but we're confident we can beat their service. So,
yeah. All right. So let's talk about what inevitably comes with growing as quickly as you guys did. So in 10 years, you went from 8 employees to about 500.
Yeah.
Right? So in that period of time, how do you make sure that your guys' level of quality and what you guys expect as the finished product, right, the service that you're providing, to maintain that same level of quality as you've grown like that?
Well, I think, we've made a couple acquisitions along the way. And one of our acquisitions was a company in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And the owner of that company, we kept on board he's now our VP of operations. And he's still in Lake Charles. Kenny's still in Louisiana. I'm still in Houston. So that helps again, right? Having, senior level management on site, working with the guys on a daily basis certainly helps in that. And then, 2 is because we're not the low bid. We offer competitive salaries, which helps, we're able to hire people with experience, people who've been around for a few years and have kind of demonstrated their ability to provide. Safety is the most important thing, right? And if we can provide the service safely, that's the main service people are looking for, right? So if a guy's been in the business, 5-10 years and has a proven track record of working safely, that's someone we want to add to our team. And then we have a onboarding and training program where because of the work we do is dangerous. When we bring someone in, they're going to spend a week or 2 in the classroom. They're going to spend another week or 2 learning the equipment. Even if they come to us with experience, we want to make sure that they know how to do it our way. So we spend a lot of time and invest a lot of energy in our people before we put them in front of a customer on a job site.
Okay. What about on the quality control side? Do you guys have any kind of technology that you guys have deployed, different quality control checklists, different things like that guys are going through when they're out there on a job, making sure that it's adhering to the quality that you guys promise?
We don't really have anything like that. What we do, we have account managers. So if we go to work for a customer, our account manager is their primary point of contact. He's, on site and handles every aspect of the job and every aspect of customer relationships. So through direct communication with the customer, we get like real-time feedback on the quality of our service. And then we do some things where we do outreach to customers to get feedback and surveys and those type things to make sure we're living up to their expectations. And we're fortunate we did a kind of a more kind of all-encompassing customer outreach recently and got back, 95% were kind of rave reviews, and the 5% wasn't really the quality of work. It was some back office stuff. But our first line of defense or first line of kind of customer feedback is that account manager who's, sitting in the customer's office every day, figuring out what he needs and how we can best serve him.
Okay. All right, so you're the CEO of the company, which that role changes a bunch when you're going
Yeah.
from 8 to 500 employees, right?
Yep.
So you've got to kind of work on yourself and learn different things along the way and manage differently and all those sorts of things. So I want to talk about that here in just a second. But before we go into what you're doing day to day and what you've done over the last 10 years to elevate your own abilities,
Yeah.
what does Kenny do on a day to day basis for the organization?
Kenny's, Kenny is the one who's kind of setting the vision, right? Kenny's the president of the business. He's still involved in day-to-day operations. He and I talk regularly, and we might not always agree on everything, but before it rolls out, we will have a unified voice, right? And what I like to say is Kenny's kind of the gas that pushes us forward, and then I'm the rudder, and kind of make sure we're kind of going where he wants to go, you know. And Selena, she's got the toughest job of all. She just tries to make sure the ship stays afloat. She does a great job. But that's kind of the dynamic. We talk about any of the major decisions that need to happen. We communicate with with each other and make sure we're kind of on the same page and aligned on where we want to go. But Kenny is ultimately, I'm the CEO in title. Kenny's the founder of the business, and in a lot of ways we all work for Kenny.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's typical that the vision comes from the founder,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's a typical thing for it, typical way for things to happen.
Yeah.
And many entrepreneurs throughout the country are definitely visionary people.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever read the book Traction by Gino Wickman.
I have not.
Okay. It's one that you should definitely read. So it's just called Traction, easy to find, and it's basically the basis of this system called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, right? And it talks about how many successful businesses are built to certain levels based on there being a visionary and an integrator, right? And based on what you're telling me and the way that you're explaining your guys' relationship and what I know about you personally, I think that that's probably what's going on here. Is you're the operational guy, you're the one who makes sure that it happens a certain way. Kenny's more the idea guy for the most part and saying, here's where I want to go.
Yep.
Chad, how are we going to get there?
Right. Yep. And like I said, then as a management team, we get together. It's a pretty collaborative effort. We're because we built the company the way we did, we've all kind of worn different hats or multiple hats at the same time. And it really was everyone do what needs to be done to get us through this. Because of that, we all trust each other. It's been great. So we all trust, when we get in the room together, we're all going to do, like I said earlier, we're not always going to agree, but we will come to a decision that we can all walk out of there knowing that this is the best track for the company.
Yep. And that's the way it should be. If you're having respectful debate, right, you're ultimately going to come to the best decision for the organization.
Yep.
Okay, so one more thing before we kind of jump to what you've done over the last 10 years or how you've evolved as a leader. You mentioned Selena being the CFO, and we've talked about this a time or two on the program, and I just want to kind of get your thoughts, even though Selena could definitely give more thoughts on this. But I think what happens is you've got these entrepreneurs and small business owners who are listening to this program, and most people that are listening to this program are running a business that does somewhere between 3 and 20 million is kind of like the standard, right?
Yeah.
Definitely some up to 50 million, 2 or 3 up to 100 million. So you guys are, definitely the outlier. But what shocks most entrepreneurs that are running, call it that $5 million a year business, is that $100 million companies still potentially struggle with cash flow.
Oh, yeah.
And managing the cash flow.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for us, in a lot of ways, it was probably easier when we were smaller. I mean, we pay our crews weekly. And, I remember, we had the conversation when our weekly payroll was larger than some of our monthly revenue numbers used to be, and especially on these large projects like these turnarounds, our customers are paying us sometimes 60, sometimes 90 days later. But we have, 100 employees to pay. We have hotel rooms and per diem to pay. There's a cash drain up front, and we won't see the revenue, we won't see the cash for another 60 to 90 days. So how Selena juggles our cash flow and how she's been able to do it, through the whole, 10 years that she's been full-time CFO is really impressive. I don't know that, internally she definitely gets all the credit. I don't know that all of our employees really appreciate the work that she's done to keep us afloat.
Yeah, I mean, I literally met with an ownership team yesterday of a smaller organization, but they'll do about 12 million this year in revenue. So a really successful business, as by all measures in the United States,
Yeah.
right? And we were talking through that, and just the fact that they're still dealing with cash flow issues, and employees don't fully understand that or recognize that. Yes, you completed the job today, and yes, you're getting paid tomorrow because we pay every week or every other week. But we're not going to see the money on that for 30, 60, or 90 days.
Right.
We have to float that. We have to constantly float that. And then you go to the billing department and they think, well, what's the big deal? We collected this much, in invoices today. That's right. A big. Yeah, but that's only 25% of our payroll.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. And so it's really tough to get that across, especially as the organization gets larger. Employees tend to think that the company has just gobs of cash. The owners live in, their best life. They've got millions and millions and millions a yacht and this and that, and they don't realize that the day-to-day cash flow is still a big, big headache.
Right. And, a lot of our employees, think that if we do $1 million in revenue, that we made $1 million, right? 800,000 of that was cost. There's 300,000 of that was labor cost by itself. It's the money shakes out by the time we paid all our bills and we finally do collect. It's not all the money that everyone thinks, and that's an education piece that we also, our management, as people kind of move up into management in our company, we sit them down and we talk them through it. A lot of people in small business, I believe, and certainly for us, have been promoted because they're really good at their job, right? And they may start out as an entry-level person. They get promoted to supervisor because they're really good. And then, they've run some crews and then they get promoted into some level of management, right? And no one's ever sat them down and talked to them about a P&L, right? Or what, direct costs and what's, how are your direct costs affecting profitability and what really shakes out from every dollar you make. And I think that's important too, that you're very transparent with the people who are doing the day-to-day work for your company, because until they know that, it's easy for them to spend money too, right? And obviously an important part of growing is, and cash flow is controlling what money you spend. And if the people who are out there doing the work don't understand how much really comes from every dollar they make, it's easy for them to spend kind of carelessly.
Yeah. I remember the first time I was handed a corporate credit card as, to handle my expense account, right? The travel that I did on behalf of the company and all those sorts of things. And I'll never forget that the verbiage that I was given was, if you spend this as though it's your own money, the way that you would spend your own money, then everything will probably be fine, right? Because nobody spends their own money willy-nilly and doesn't think about, how much they're spending, how much it costs. Am I staying in too nice of a hotel? Did I really need the $50 steak when the $20 steak was, was good enough?
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. So it's an education across the board for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So Chad, let's talk about your own progression throughout the last 10 years, right? So I'm going to ask you to kind of self-diagnose and look deeply inside and just talk us through maybe 2 or 3 lessons that you've learned along the way and things that you've done yourself to become the leader that you are today compared to what you were 10 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. So, I didn't come out of business school, right? My background is chemistry and biology. And like I said earlier, I came up in the industry, doing environmental work, and was one of those people who was promoted, like I talked about. I was field chemist, did well there, was able to manage projects, got promoted, became a division manager, and had no had no formal training or really informal training on how to manage people, how to evaluate and manage a P&L. I was fortunate to have mentors who worked with me to teach me those things. But, the most important part was realizing what I didn't know, right? And being willing to ask for help, which for me, really coming up was hard to, coming up like the way I did, what asking for help really was saying, I don't know what I'm doing, right? So, which is a scary situation, to admit that I didn't know what I was doing felt like failure, felt like I was letting the people who promoted me down. So the first main lesson I learned was how to ask for help, and I think that not enough people learn that lesson early enough, right? Sometimes it's only when they're completely drowning that they'll raise their hand and ask for help, when, asking earlier on would have, could have saved them a lot of trouble. And then, I've done a lot of work, just on myself, a lot of personal growth work, from shadow work, working with coaches, working with mentors, to really understand. And then I read a lot too, to really understand kind of where my thoughts and beliefs come from, how they got there. If I'm stressed and I respond a certain way, why am I responding that way? So there's a lot of introspection and personal growth work that I do personally that I think helps me. A line that's been sticking with me lately is it's in a book I read years ago, but I came across the quote recently. It said, "There's no Zen at the mountaintop, right? The only Zen you find at the top of a mountain is the Zen you bring with you." And I really believe that, if you don't do the work on yourself to really understand yourself before you get successful, or, to the top of any mountain or to where you want to be, the challenges that are waiting for you when you get there are going to be harder to handle, right? They're a lot easier to deal with if you've done the work and laid the foundation, on the way up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I think there's some great wisdom in what you just said. I mean, being introspective and working on yourself as a person, regardless of what your role is in any organization, is something that anybody should do.
Yep.
I'm a big believer in constantly gaining knowledge in any way that you can get it, right? Yeah, and once we're out of school, there's typically not a formal way of getting that, right? So whether it's out of high school or out of college or business school or whatever the case may be, it's up to you to gain that knowledge yourself. And so depending on who you are as an individual and how you learn or how you're able to spend your time, it may be an audio book or it may be reading the physical book.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with either one, right?
No.
You spend a lot of time in the truck, I know that. And so I'm
Yeah.
guessing you do a fair amount on
audiobooks. And then that Blinkist app, I don't know if you've used Blinkist, but it kind of distills down, these great books into 15-minute versions. And, those are great options too. And, I still like to spend some time every morning just reading a physical book. Like I still enjoy flipping the pages and, the feel of a book in my hands. I spend a lot of time reading as well.
Yeah, lifelong learning is a skill that I think everybody should have. And
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I would encourage anybody listening to do whatever you can to constantly be learning.
Yeah, I have I mentioned earlier, my daughter's about to be 12, and she's in swim, and she plays some volleyball and stuff. So I was talking to someone about coaching recently, and I just used her as an example. I said, I sent her to coaches so she can get better at swim and volleyball and all those things, right? Until I think I have it all figured out, it would make it makes all the sense in the world to want to work with a coach, right? I'm not the best CEO I can be today, right? I know I can be better in a lot of ways. So I want to learn. I want to work with a coach and mentors who can help me get there. So that's just, I try to instill that in it. If you have an opportunity, especially if your company's going to pay for it, to work with a coach, it's worth asking your supervisor, your boss, or whatever. Hey, is this something you'd be willing to do? Because I think I can get better at this aspect of my job. If an employee comes to me and says they want to get better, I'm going to invest in that employee.
Yeah. So are you currently working with a CEO coach, or have in the past?
I have in the past, kind of in between coaches right now, but I've worked with several, during COVID, I was, kind of in a rut and reached out and found a purpose coach who helped me. So a lot of times, there are kind of an incident, or I'll find myself stuck, and then I'll reach out to the network of people that I know and work with a coach. And it's usually like a, 4 to 6 month engagement that I'll work with them, and kind of now I'm at a point where I kind of work through an issue, and then, but yeah, absolutely. I expect that I will always, work with mentors and coaches to try to get better.
Yeah, I think it's important. Everybody talks about, Fortune 500 CEOs, or, whatever the case may be. And, they don't have coaches. Well, yeah, actually, most of them do. Whether you like him or hate him, everybody knows the name Tom Brady, right?
Yep.
And Tom Brady, his entire life, has had a coach.
Yep.
Multiple coaches for different areas of what it is that he does. So it could easily be argued, whether you like it or not, that he's the greatest of all time in terms of NFL quarterbacks, right? But what I find interesting about him specifically is the last couple of years, I guess it is, at Tampa Bay, his quarterbacks coach / offensive coordinator was Byron Leftwich, right? Mm-hmm. Byron Leftwich didn't have the same physical talents that Tom Brady had, but he knows and sees things differently than Tom does, and that's a benefit to Tom.
Yep.
Right? And like Brett Favre and Donovan McNabb, who have both talked about what Ty Detmer meant to them in their careers. Ty Detmer was a Heisman Trophy winner, but didn't have the physical traits to be one of the best NFL quarterbacks. He was shorter and wasn't super mobile, but he knows the game extremely well and made Donovan McNabb and Brett Favre better at their game.
Yep.
Why would it be any different for us as people who are running businesses to reach out to a coach the same way that professional athletes that are making millions of dollars a year because they're the most talented at what they do, they still have coaches?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that having a coach is one of the best things someone can do, especially as you're growing your business, because challenges present themselves every day, and most of them are challenges you haven't confronted yet, right? So why not work with someone who sees it a different way, or can pick out your blind spots, right? Because we all have them. So yeah, I'm a big advocate of professional coaching, and then on a less formal basis, mentorship. I think that one of my favorite things to do is mentor people, and I still have a network of mentors that I rely on for any kind of situation that comes up.
All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about what the future holds for Vecta, right? Yeah. Like, where do we go from here? How long do you think Kenny wants to do this? How long do you want to do this? What do you guys envision being, the transitionary period, for example, with Vecta? And then after that, I want to talk about your background on the nonprofit side and what you personally are passionate about.
Okay. Yeah. So, Kenny and I are, still actively involved and want to push it. Our agenda, our kind of goal is to double in 4 years. So in 4 years, we want to be 200 million. We think it's doable. That's going to involve us, this year alone, we've opened 2 new offices, 2 new locations. We have our site set on a third, which will either be kind of Q4 or maybe early next year. And then, it's going to take some more acquisitions to get where we want to go. the Gulf Coast is really the sweet spot for the services we provide. And there's work throughout the country. One of our offices that we just opened is in Decatur, Alabama. There's a lot of industry in that area. There's a lot of industry on the East Coast that we're not touching because of our footprint. So we understand that to get to where we want to go, our footprint has to grow. So that's certainly in our plans as well. So our 4-year plan is to double in size and then kind of see where we go. But I'm 52. Kenny's a little younger than me. Selena's a little younger than him. So and then David Owen, who's our VP, is kind of right in there too. So we're all in it for for the next 5 years as a minimum, and then kind of see where it goes after that.
So I don't know if you've read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen, right? Yeah. Most people have. One of the things one of the lines in there that he's famous for is begin with the end in mind, right? Kenny definitely did not begin with the end in mind. I've never met him, but the way he got started, that wasn't the case. Very few business owners is that the case, right? But at this point, now it's okay. There's got to be an end in mind. At what point, it's still flexible, right? But at what point do I want to exit this business and how? Yeah. Have you guys had that conversation at all?
Yeah, we have. And, I think, I don't want to put words in Kenny's mouth. I think, at our next, so we partnered with private equity in 2018. We've kind of, and then we kind of outgrew them, and then partnered with our current partner just at the very end of the year last year, like right at New Year's Eve, kind of. So I think at the next transition, Kenny may consider it. It depends on where the company is, what the next partner wants and expects. But I think at that point, he may look at least coming up with a transition plan. Whether I'm sure that they're going to want him to hang around for a few years. So maybe it's 3 years or 2 or 3 years afterwards. I would suspect, based on some of our conversations, that's probably his timeline. Mine would probably be a little bit longer, just based on the role. I think, I don't mind hanging around and going for a little longer run. And it's, a lot of it really depends on if they still want to keep us around. It depends on who that next partner is. If it's a strategic, they may think that they have a management team in place that can do it better than us, and our plans would be out the window anyway. But if we had it ideally, I think that's probably his timeline.
Yeah, and I mean, it really depends on your industry and the size and all those kinds of things. But private equity can be a great way to go. I mean, Kenny, I'm sure, can speak to the fact that he took some chips off the table with the first one, and then probably took some more chips off the table at the end of last year. And then, maybe he takes the rest of the chips off the table the next go round, like you mentioned. So that can be beneficial to him. It can be beneficial to you, obviously, as his management team and the organization as a whole. So that sounds like you guys are on an exciting track.
It is. And one thing we've been able to do through the process is give meaningful ownership to some of our key employees who've been with us along the ride. So for them, each time we cycle in, that they see a little windfall too, and we're able to give more. So it's been a good run for a lot of us. So
yeah, sure. All right, so let's talk about what you're passionate about on the nonprofit side, right? Yep. So I was keyed in on your bio here, where it says you're active in your community, working with anti-racism organizations in Houston and New Orleans, and then a member of the Mankind Project, a global brotherhood of nonprofit charitable organizations dedicated to personal development, multicultural awareness, and community service. And if that wasn't enough, you recently co-founded the Second Story Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating more inclusive organizations and empowering individuals to excel to their highest potential. So they're all tied together. Right? It's all about inclusivity. It's about fighting racism, all those sorts of things. So let me just put you on your own soapbox, so to speak, and tell me why that's so important to you and what you guys are literally doing day to day with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up in Norfolk, we had a really diverse neighborhood. It's Navy families. So, we had friends, and our house was kind of the gathering place, right? So we would have friends, of different races, different cultures, all kind of meeting at our house. And we were a really tight knit little group of people. And I saw firsthand, I had a neighbor who was, but I mean, he was just a neo-Nazi. He house caught on fire. He jumped out the window holding Mein Kampf. He wouldn't let go of that on his way out the window. And so I saw firsthand how racism just affects people, right? I saw my friends bear the brunt of it. So it's always something that stuck with me. And then when I got involved with the Mankind Project, which I went to really for personal growth, right? And got really involved through the Mankind Project with an organization in Houston called the Center for the Healing of Racism. Became an active member there and started developing and facilitating workshops to really teach anti-racism and anti-racism awareness to community groups in the community, like church groups, going to schools, teaching it to kids in school, teaching it to adults on really how to have honest, open conversations about race and racism with people that don't agree with you, right? Who don't look like me, don't think like me, don't come from the same background as me. But we don't have to agree, but we can have these open, honest conversations and come to a place of common understanding and appreciation. So just through my exposure to that organization, and there's another organization in New Orleans that I've done some work with, the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, which is really about, it's another anti-racism organization. It's just something that's always been kind of a part of me and who I am. It's kind of the values that I kind of picked up growing up where I grew up. And then the reality is, our employee base and the people who do the work that we do, in large part, are people of color, right? It's a very diverse workforce, and the appreciation that I have for all the people that do this work, what we're proud of at Vecta is that our leadership team looks like our employee base. And not all of our competition has that. The reality is, I tell the story a lot. I was on a trade show, I was walking across a trade show floor one day, trade show floor. And, it was kind of before the show opened, and I was looking around, and it was all, middle-aged white guys or younger white women, right? And I know that the people who do the work don't look like us, for the most part. So the thought, really came to me, like, where is the ceiling that prevents those people from coming in, and what doors are closed to them? Why aren't they here representing the companies, right? So that's really when my nonprofit kind of passion work overlapped with my day-to-day paycheck work, right? And what can I do then to raise that ceiling and open those doors so that the people who work for us actually represent us, are the face of the company as well. So, that's just kind of, again, it's just a part of who I am and a part of the values that I've always had. My mom, grew up in Wisconsin, and her best friend was a Native American girl. And my mom would catch shrapnel just from being friends with this young girl, and so she always instilled in us, the values of, appreciating and respecting everyone's humanity and seeing the beauty in everybody.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. I think, hopefully you guys are doing stuff internally in the organization so that the members of your organization realize how committed you are to that, and it's not just something that you're paying lip service to.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think, unfortunately, the way that this whole diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff has rolled out nationwide, a lot of companies are just kind of doing exactly that.
Oh, yeah.
They're paying service to it. They're checking the box, right? Like, we hired this percentage of this group, and that's the way that they're approaching it. Whereas for you, hopefully your employees realize, like, this is who you are at your core.
Right.
And it's not just that you're checking the box because you basically have to now from a federal standpoint.
Right.
This is something you guys have done for a while, and that you truly believe in and live day in and day out.
Yeah, and the Second Story Project, the nonprofit that I co-founded, that's what we tell organizations that we work with is this is not a check the box training, right? You can't go online and watch a couple of videos and go through a test and say you did your training so you can check it off. I mean, ours is an experiential workshop where it's really based on people telling their own stories, right? The reason we call it the Second Story Project is a lot of times, I'll get so caught up in my story and my beliefs that I kind of hunker down and throw insults and, accusations at the other people who are hunkered down in their bunker. They're doing the same. And we don't take time to listen to each other, right? So what we do is we create a situation where we create an environment where we're going to listen to each other. And, so I have my story and you have yours, but together we can co-create a second story together that works for everybody. And that's kind of what we try to do.
Yeah. This is something that I've kind of worked on with myself over the last several years, where I didn't even have a realization, to be honest with you, of some of the biases that I grew up with and held, personally without knowing it. Right. I mean, I've had friends of multiple races, backgrounds, cultures, religions, and I've never felt like I judged anybody or looked at them differently. But as I've looked internally and realized there are some things that I think that I thought were different about them, or I treat them differently or react differently to them than I should. And so, I point that out to point out that most of us have those blind spots and those biases that we grew up with that we don't even realize we had.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, it's culture versus, or not culture, but nature versus nurture, right? The way that we grew up or where we grew up
Absolutely
can have a huge impact on the way that we see the world.
Right. And, I don't look, there is overt racism, right? There's no doubt that that is an aspect of not only our society, society in general, right? And I think for me, the learning was that that's not all that racism is, right? Not all racism is a hood and burning crosses and all that. There are little aspects of my life that are unconscious to me most of the time. Even someone who does the work all the time, I still, whether it comes to me and I realize it myself, or someone tells me about it. What's important for me is when someone does tell me about it, to not get defensive, to really hear what they have to say, because whatever I did, whatever I said, sparked something in them, right? So I need to hear that. So just being open to the fact that, and it's not my fault, it's not my parents' fault that I'm this way, it's not anyone's fault. So the lady who runs the Center for the Healing of Racism, Cherry Steinwender, is a dear friend, love her to death. She always says, racism is America's disease. It's not your fault, you're sick, but it's your responsibility to get better, right? So that's kind of how I view it. It's just I want to do what I can to make myself better, teach the people in my little circle what I know, in the hopes that they can kind of create larger bubbles and the circle gets bigger that way.
Yeah, because to your point, the overt racism does exist, right? But the biggest percentage of racism that we see in our country is the non-overt racism.
Yep.
Right? Very few people would consider themselves racist or overtly act in a way or do something that is racist.
Right.
It's the stuff that's unconscious to us that we don't realize that we're doing or saying that is portraying that racism.
Absolutely. And to be, and kind of back to the coaching thing, through my work with these organizations, I've learned so much about it, right? It wasn't until I got involved in these organizations that I really learned how much of that was still in me, in spite of the fact that I know, look, that's not my intention. I have these values that I believe in, and there were still parts of me that there are still racist beliefs that come to me occasionally that I have to work through.
Yep. It's that lifelong learning thing and that lifelong self-introspection, right? We all have to work on it all the time.
Yep.
Well, Chad, I really appreciated the conversation. I appreciate you as a person and what you believe in and what you're doing in your community. And as a business leader and what you guys are doing at Vecta and building there. It's fun to watch, and I look forward to watching you guys grow from 100 to 200 and beyond.
Yeah, Austin, I appreciate it, man. It's been a joy talking with you, and thank you for all the work you're doing to kind of, like you said, it's the backbone of the company, of the country, the small businesses. So your support in that community is awesome and appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being willing to come on and tell your story.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You've been listening to Tycoons of Small Biz, a podcast for small business owners by small business owners. Join us next week for an introduction to another great tycoon, and be sure to follow us on our social media channels for links to all of our episodes and great content.